right. Thank you very much, Jim. Hello, everyone. Thanks for making it to the webinar. I am delighted to also welcome you to the launch of our research on landscape mapping of civil society digital security in West Africa. I would like to congratulate WACSI for this timely and highly significant study. I would also like to thank and congratulate the entire research team, some of who are present today in this webinar, for the entire project and for the successful implementation of this project. The report sheds light on the experiences, the challenges facing civil society organizations in the region, and it provides practical recommendations for improving their digital security. We believe that this report is an essential resource, as Jim rightly mentioned, for all stakeholders involved in promoting digital security in West Africa. In this presentation, we will be sharing with you some key findings and recommendations of the report. And we hope that the presentation will not only be informative, but also thought-provoking, and will encourage us all to promote and practice digital security in our organizations. So, arguably, civil society organizations represent a third force in the development trajectory of every country, separate from the government and the private sector. They are essential actors in shaping public discourse, encouraging accountability, and promoting community development. And in today's digital era, digital technology plays a significant role in the operations and activities of CSOs, enabling them to reach wider audiences, collaborate effectively, and promote their missions. Just to mention a few examples, social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter are used for information sharing and promotion, enabling CSOs to disseminate information, advertise events, and engage with their stakeholders. Online donation platforms, including Give Directly, Just Giving, GoFundMe, and so on and so forth, empower CSOs to fundraise through donation appeals, product sales, and crowdfunding campaigns. So without doubt, digital technology is becoming deeply intertwined with the work of CSOs. Ensuring digital security is therefore critical to protecting the effectiveness and the impact of these organizations. Meanwhile, as CSOs increasingly rely on digital technology for their operations, they also become more vulnerable to digital security threats. The shift towards digital activities, precipitated by COVID-19, has amplified the potential for digital security threats to CSOs. Unfortunately, the lack of resources, technical capacities, and national digital security programs tailored to accommodate CSOs in West Africa exacerbates their vulnerability, underscoring the importance of addressing digital security concerns and implementing strategies to promote CSOs' cybersecurity threats or cyber threats. Now, this research aimed to provide a comprehensive understanding of the digital security landscape for CSOs in West Africa. And just to be specific, we approached the research with 6 main objectives in mind. The first was to identify and analyze the most common digital security threats CSOs in West Africa face. And
hello, Evan.
Secondly, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you abruptly, and colleagues, sorry. We will come back to these objectives. Apparently, our interpreter, they are muted. So our colleagues in French or French-speaking colleagues cannot smoothly follow the conversations. Kindly permit us to re-invite our interpreters and ensure that our French speakers are following smoothly as well. You know, these threats are impacting us, you know, indiscriminately, irrespective of the countries or the language we speak. And so it's important that, you know, our colleagues who are here who speak French equally follow to understand what this study has for us. Les collègues en français, colleagues, is the interpretation going on well? Can colleagues, French-speaking colleagues, can they confirm? Est-ce que ça marche jusqu'à présent?
On reçoit mieux maintenant, on reçoit mieux l'interprétation.
OK, merci beaucoup. Merci pour votre confirmation. On apprécie. Sorry, Evans, you know, and kindly take us through the objectives that guided, you know, the great work that we did together. Evans?
All right. Thank you, Jim. So first, we sought to identify and analyze the most common digital security threats facing CSOs in West Africa. Secondly, to assess the exposure of these CSOs to digital security threats and attacks, and then also to evaluate the preparedness of CSOs in responding to digital security threats and attacks. And then examining also the national level policy framework in West Africa that address digital security, as well as the organizational level digital security policies that also seek to address digital security. And lastly, identifying the major challenges CSOs face in their efforts to promote their digital security threats. I will be presenting the results in the order of these objectives. But before then, let's take a look at the methodology we employed in this research. To accomplish the research objectives and provide an in-depth understanding of the digital security landscape for CSOs in West Africa, we employed a multifaceted methodology. First, we conducted a thorough analysis of the digital security literature, as well as national level regulatory framework, including legislations, policies, strategy documents, and so on and so forth. Afterwards, we developed and rolled out a survey questionnaire to which 284 CSOs representatives from a pool of over 2,000 responded. These CSOs are distributed. They are distributed across all 15 ECOWAS countries, as well as countries like Cameroon, Chad, and Mauritania. So in all, 18 countries were included in the study. This allowed for us to gather a wide range of perspectives and experiences related to digital security. Next, we conducted in-depth interviews with 24 respondents selected from a list of over 60 CSOs that reported having experienced digital security threats within the last 6 months. By employing such a methodology, we sought to provide a comprehensive picture of the digital security landscape in West Africa. So now let's move to the results. Beginning with some key insights on the most common digital security threats facing CSOs in West Africa. Because of time, most of the insights we'll be sharing with you in this presentation are from the survey, but you can read more about the case studies in the main report, and I'm also happy to really respond to questions later on if there are any. Based on the survey, we found that 3 out of every 10 of the sample CSOs had suffered a digital security attack within the last 12 months. 48% of the victims suffered virus attacks that resulted in data loss. And lastly, Nigeria accounts for a lion's share of the experienced attacks, followed by Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Guinea. Now, let's look at some details. I mentioned that a third of the sampled CSOs experienced digital security attacks. Of these, 48% experienced computer virus attacks. In other words, computer virus attacks were the most common. Apart from that, 43% also experienced social media attacks. 33% also experienced email attacks, and about a quarter even experienced physical attacks. In terms of geographical distribution of the attacks, I mentioned earlier that Nigeria leads the pack. In the main report, we show the geographical distribution also by type of attack, and it appears Nigeria leads on all the top 4 attacks, namely virus attacks, social media attacks, email attacks, and physical attacks. In our analysis, we coded all the various forms of attacks CSOs experienced, and then assigned them with their respective so-called technical names, as usually used in the literature. And then we examined their frequency of occurrence. In the report, we have described each of these in detail. Interestingly, malicious code, software and hardware failure, as well as espionage, appear to be the most frequently occurring. For those who are new to this, a malicious code is essentially what is known as malware. Some people call it virus. It's a software program with a malicious intent. Espionage is also one form of a man-in-the-middle attack where the attacker secretly gathers information from the victim without their knowledge and then uses the information later on for some gain. We also found that across board, there was some variation in the type of digital security incidents by type of organization. Overall, international NGOs experienced the lowest rate of attacks, whereas community-based organizations and local NGOs experience higher rate of attacks. This perhaps leads to some intuitive conclusion that probably international NGOs are better resourced to tackle their digital security issues compared to community-based organizations and local NGOs. We try to test this assumption by using the age of the organization as a proxy for how established they are and perhaps the resources they may have. We then use that and then the subjective evaluation of the respondents regarding how digitally secure they think their organizations are as a proxy for organizational digital security. As can be seen from the graph, we did not find evidence to suggest that age of the organization mattered for their digital security. However, we also indicated in the report that this is only preliminary and there may be a lot of things to consider. And so this might merit further investigation. Next, after detailing the digital security experiences of civil society organizations, we move on to examine how exposed CSOs are to digital security threats and attacks based on the nature of their activities and their digital security practices. We find that 99% of CSOs use emails, 97% use laptops and desktop computers, 89% use mobile phones and tablets in their operations. So the list goes on and on. Meanwhile, 43% do not know of any methods or ways to protect their digital tools and activities. 67% do not know what to do in case their digital system or device is hacked or infected. And 70% have never participated in any digital security training or courses which taught them how to use the internet or digital devices securely. In line with their low capacity to handle digital security threats, 85% of respondents were worried about the safety of information, and 77% also being worried about the safety of their digital tools. CSOs' low capacity and resource challenges are further highlighted when we take a closer look at some of their digital security practices. 95% of the CSOs reported that they use strong passwords for their digital devices and internet accounts. This is really impressive, but it's also interesting because perhaps this is the only basic and free item on the list. The figure drops significantly once we move to relatively more advanced and perhaps expensive techniques. We asked the respondents whether their organizations have a dedicated budget for information security, and unsurprisingly, 73% answered in the negative. So we have learned that most of the CSOs have no financial allocation to serving their digital security needs. Interestingly, the key informant interviews we had with some CSOs revealed that the social and financial cost of attacks could be gravely devastating and sometimes even costly than having a dedicated budget for digital security and putting in place the necessary measures to operate securely in the digital space. For example, in some instances, there were attacks on CSO social media accounts, and the attackers went on to post inappropriate contents, damaging the reputation of the CSOs. And some CSOs reported having lost donors in consequence. So trust and reputational damage are key social consequences that we found associated with digital security attacks in the region. There were also instances where CSOs lost sensitive data, as well as reports they have been working on for years, but had no backup. And so they had to start from the scratch all over again, consequently disrupting their activities. Some CSOs also lost significant amount of time trying to repair the damage caused. And so some also had psychological effects. We use the information that we have from the key informant interviews to estimate some financial cost or potential financial cost of digital security attacks. And we found out out that the cost could actually range from as low as around $10,000 to roughly over $500,000 or even more. Having learned about the exposure of CSOs to digital security threats, let's delve into the preparedness towards responding to these threats. You recall that you mentioned earlier that 70% of the respondents have never participated in any digital security training. Of this 30% that have participated in a training, 62% took online courses and 39% taught themselves how to secure themselves from digital security threats. When asked what actually they learned, 92% mentioned that they learned about how to use strong passwords. And again, the figure drops significantly once we move on to more advanced techniques. We asked the respondents what they would be interested in learning should they have the opportunity to participate in a digital security training. And here are the results. You can see that the information on the words like security, protection, and data tend to stand out, suggesting that people are really interested in learning about how to protect their data, how to protect their digital devices. They're really interested in learning about techniques that they can use to protect their devices and information. We also constructed a network diagram. And in the network diagram that you see here, the bigger the circle, the more frequently the word was used by the respondents. And as you can see, the interconnections also demonstrate the patterns in the responses. And again, data protection as well as device security tend to stand out. So we move on to the national level digital security laws and policies in West Africa. Interestingly, a large proportion of the respondents, 45%, were not aware of any national laws or regulations on digital security. We come back to perhaps maybe more details on this later, but it's really worrying that such a large proportion of respondents had no idea about data protection laws or regulations about digital security in the region. We also found that 70% of the CSOs are not registered with any data protection agency. Data protection agencies are really important because they provide a framework for handling data within organizations. Organizations constantly are collecting data from stakeholders, from clients, and from donors, et cetera. And so registering with relevant data protection agencies help organizations to stick to data protection rules and regulations. But interestingly, a large proportion of the CSOs have not registered with any data protection policies at all. And as I mentioned earlier, 45% of the respondents are not aware of any national laws or regulations on digital security. Now, we went on to develop some kind of a framework to analyze the countries, and to look at to what extent each of them have comprehensive policies that are meant to address digital security in the region. And you can find details of this in the report, but what perhaps you might be guessing is that not many countries really have comprehensive policies, and your guess is right. Only few countries really have comprehensive policies in place to address digital security. So if you look at countries like Burkina Faso, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo, the comprehensiveness of their policies are somehow better as compared to the rest. Just to highlight some of the gaps and weaknesses in terms of policy, lack of legislation in some countries like Liberia and also Guinea-Bissau pose a significant challenge. In some countries also, some of the legal provisions pose risks to privacy and freedom of expression online. There were also some countries where penalties for cyber crimes were relatively far too low to deter such crimes. And also, harmonization of national digital security regulations is quite low on the continent. It's really important that digital security laws at the national level are harmonized with international frameworks, because digital security cut across, we know that the internet is boundless, right? It has no geographical boundaries. And so there is a need for collaboration in digital security promotion efforts. And so there are a couple of frameworks, international frameworks that are existent. The Budapest Convention is one of them. The African Union also has a framework in place. The ECOWAS also has a framework in place. But only a few countries really have let me say, signed and ratified these international frameworks or conventions, particularly the African Union Convention. Oftentimes, whether organizational members adopt digital security practices or not depend also hugely on whether the organization has a policy in place within the organization requiring members to do so. Hence, we now turn to organizational level digital security policies or strategies. Interestingly, 68% of the CSOs do not have any such policies in place within the organization. It's therefore not surprising that digital security vulnerabilities tend to be high for CSOs due to certain practices. For example, 69% of respondents use their personal digital devices for work, and 13% even use other people's private devices for work. Also, 37% of the respondents reported that their spouses and sometimes their friends and family members also use their work devices. And then, even more interestingly, 47% of the respondents indicated that their organizations have lost digital devices. And I think we can all imagine what could happen to a lost digital device with sensitive information on it, with no data protection. So when we asked whether they tracked digital devices within the organization, 75% indicated that they do not track their digital devices. In the wake of COVID-19, many employees of CSOs work from home. And this was confirmed by 93% of the respondents mentioning that they work from home. Meanwhile, only about 27% use VPNs, that's virtual private networks, to secure their remote connections. Perhaps the good news is that when it comes to attitudes towards digital security, it appears that many people within CSOs have interest in promoting their digital safety. And so 83% of them call for the attention to digital security within their organizations. We also found that where digital security policies were existent within the organization, in some cases, they were not well disseminated or implemented. Now, let's move to maybe just a few other words on the digital policies within the organization. Apart from weak implementation within the organization, we also found that actually a lot of people did not really understand the contents of the policies at all. And so they were consequently found to deviate from the contents of the set policies. Let's move to the digital security challenges facing CSOs. I think by now, many of you may have already guessed what the potential challenges could be. I will quickly just run through this and we can discuss them later on in the open forum. The first is inadequate ICT and digital security infrastructure among CSOs, followed by low digital security awareness, inadequate training, and limited skills to implement effective cybersecurity measures. Next is limited funding to invest in cybersecurity and dependence on donor funding for operations and also for meeting digital security needs. Next challenge is lack of organizational level digital security policies and strategies. And we know how important organizational level policies could be. There were really very few cases where CSOs really had organizational level policies. And this is a very important challenge. Repression within the civic space is also another key challenge civil society organizations are facing. Oftentimes, it appears that civil society organizations tend to be enemies of governments or enemies of government agencies. And so there were instances where civil society organizations reported being attacked, not from by private persons, but by state agencies. So this is also a very important challenge for CSOs in the region. So the list goes on and on, including inadequate legal and regulatory framework and in place at the national level, lack of harmonization with other countries and our international frameworks, understaffed law enforcement agencies with very few or no staff at all, and low capacity to really support in digital security investigations and implementation of policies. Lack of publicly available data to study the prevalence and the determinants and the effects of digital security threats and attacks was also one of the challenges. And then lastly, limited capacity or resources to really invest in prosecuting cybercrime in some countries were also found to be among the challenges. Now, so what are the conclusions that can be made from this study? And what are the recommendations? First, let's move on to recommendations, the conclusions. Based on all the results that I've presented to you, on what conclusions can we make? The first is that the prevalence of digital security threats is high in the region. Some may argue that, well, 30% or 3 in 10 is not all that high, but I think it is really high. And this is really the right time to be really concerned about digital security and to start implementing the necessary measures to secure devices and secure information until it probably gets to the extreme. Second conclusion that can be made is that computer virus attacks and social media attacks and email attacks tend to be the most common form of digital security attacks in the region. And then also community-based organizations and local NGOs experience the highest rate of attacks compared to international NGOs. The majority of CSOs also lack proper knowledge and training on how to protect themselves and their digital security, their digital tools and activities. CSOs in West Africa are facing significant gaps in their preparedness towards responding to digital security issues. The next conclusion is that the West Africa region is faced with inadequate laws and policies coupled with weak or non-implementation. And next, very few CSOs, or only few CSOs, have a computer and information security policy in place. And where those policies were existent, oftentimes effective communication of the policies was not done, and many members were found to be deviating from those policies. There is also a high level of interest among CSOs in acquiring digital security skills. So this is really a very positive thing that we found from the study, that many people showed interest in acquiring the necessary skills should the opportunity avail itself. And then lastly, lack of financial resources and inadequate ICT and digital security infrastructure, as well as low digital security awareness and skills are all are also kind of prevalent within the region. So basically, these are the main conclusions we can draw from the study. But what recommendations can be made from this study? The first recommendation is that there is a need to increase awareness on digital security. So many employees of CSOs are not aware of the potential threats that they face in operating in the digital space. There has been some attempts, and I think there has been some webinars and also some different forms of training that have been initiated by some organizations to improve upon civil society digital security awareness. I think WACSI is also a leader in this area. So congratulations, WACSI. But I think this needs to be improved, and then this need to be encouraged. We need to encourage awareness creation about digital security among CSOs. The next is also about investment in digital security infrastructure. So we have learned that the cost of perhaps responding to an attack or repairing the damages of an attack can sometimes be even far higher than the cost of putting in place the necessary measures. So it's really important that CSOs take digital security seriously and begin investing in infrastructure on digital security, such as buying original softwares and not use pirated versions, and making sure that their systems are always updated with the latest security patches and here and there. So a lot of digital security infrastructures that are available for free, but there are also a lot that CSOs can invest resources in acquiring, and which will be far helpful than waiting and rather repairing damages of attacks. The next is to train employees on digital security. So many employees have shown interest that they want to learn how to protect themselves and their devices. So this is the right time for CSOs to be really interested in and also empower their employees by helping them to train on digital security. The next is using strong passwords and authentication measures. So this was an area that most CSOs are already doing well, but they can definitely do better, or if anything at all, maintain the effort in using strong password and sometimes even multiple authentication measures for their various accounts. Again, this can be precipitated or perhaps maybe improved upon when organizations have digital security policies in place that kind of implement password policies and that employees have to abide by. The next recommendation is to back up data regularly. So some CSOs have no backups in terms of the data that they are handling in the organizations, and so they face greater risks of losing everything they have been working on in cases of attacks. There is a need to have backups both physically and also in the cloud, so that in case of data loss, data can really be retrieved without significant damage to the organizational activities. The next is to secure remote access. So the COVID has increased the rate at which people work from remote areas. Working from remote areas, especially using public Wi-Fi, also means that people or attackers, can exploit vulnerabilities, and perhaps access materials, sensitive information through certain devices connected to public networks. And so there's the need to secure remote access, for example, using virtual private networks and so on and so forth. The next is to implement mobile device management. Essentially, mobile device management means that we should have a system in place to manage the digital devices within the organization. If you have log access or access logs, where we can use to track who and who has possession of what devices, we should have in place within this device management mobile device management system, a system that is able to identify if there are some potential threats and also what potential measures can be taken to address these. Also, as part of these mobile device management strategies, there can be frequent checking of devices to ensure that softwares are up to date with the latest security patches and so on and so forth. where devices are located and so on, so that in case devices are stolen, the data on them can remotely be wiped off, to prevent sensitive data from getting into the wrong hands. Monitor devices. I think what I've explained earlier also touch on this. And implement a disaster recovery plan. So sometimes even after implementing digital security effective practices, there may be times that perhaps some organizations might fall victims, whether due to different forms of vulnerabilities. But in any case, it's really important to have a plan in place to recover from attacks. For instance, imagine an organization system, being attacked, and workers can no longer log into organizational accounts and so on and so forth. What are the immediate steps to be taken in such a situation, whilst the organization prepares to get back on track? That is what we call the disaster recovery plan. Organizations need to have digital security disaster recovery plan in place. Next is regularly update software. I think this is really straightforward. And appoint cyber security leader. So there is a need for, some organizations have IT departments. This is really, really good. But there is also the need to appoint people who specifically will see to the digital security needs of their organization. It's not a problem if these people can already be within the IT department. The key message is that there should be people responsible for monitoring the digital security situation of the organization and helping to put in place necessary measures to respond to digital security attacks. The next is consider outsourcing digital security services. There are some instances where outsourcing the digital security services might be cost effective than putting in place an interim maybe unit to handle such circumstances. So it's important to always analyze the situation and then, where necessary, outsource services. Collaborate with relevant stakeholders. Collaboration is very key because when CSOs collaborate with the government or the businesses, or even with other CSOs, they are able to exchange ideas, they're able to share experiences, they're able to share resources towards responding to their digital security needs. So collaboration is key. And last but not least, regularly review and update security practices. It's really important to note that within the digital security space, attackers are always reinventing new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. So it's not sufficient to say that, well, you have one solution and that's all. It's important to always review and update digital security practices so that new vulnerabilities can be identified and solved so that they are not exploited by new forms of attacks.
Thank you very much.
So
yes, sorry for interrupting, Evans. Just kindly to prep you to just wrap up quickly. Thank you very much. Yes. It is very interesting.
Yes. So this is the end of the presentation. There are five recommendations that we have also made at the national level. We understand that at the national level, it could be challenging, especially when we consider the fact that sometimes governments, tend to not be on the same page with civil society organizations in terms of facilitating the activities. But we have also 5 key recommendations at the national level that are worth reading from the main report. So overall, that is all I have for you here from my side. And these are the findings, the key findings of the report. We believe that this will actually begin very important conversations about securing ourselves and our devices within the civil society space in West Africa. Thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, thank you so much.